Hi friends, it's Grace and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be doing my September wrap up and I am a little bit late on this, but I don't want to end up in a situation where I go way over the time and then I end up needing to do 2 months of wrap ups in one again, which was happening to me earlier in the summer. And of course, I do still love to backtrack and talk about all of the books that I've read, but I don't love doing it that way because when it's been like 2 months since I've read something and I've read like probably 10 books since then, I just feel like I can't remember it as well and I can't talk about it as like vividly in a video. So even though we are getting close to halfway through October, this is everything that I read last month. And so this is a bit of an interesting month because it's sort of like an all or nothing in the sense that the books that I read were either really good or I really didn't like them. And there is one book that kind of falls in the middle, but basically I read 7 books and 3 of them have quite high ratings and then 3 of them have quite low ratings. And then there's like one book that's like a 3.5 star, but 7 books, almost 3,700 pages. So my average book length was 552 pages, but I did read some short things. It's just that there's also some really chunky things that I finished this month. And the average rating works out to a 3.46, but like, it's not like everything I read was a 3.5. It's like 5s or high 4s versus like 2s. Unfortunate, but it does happen sometimes. So I'm gonna just get through these like in the order that I read them. Sometimes I will go from lowest rating to highest rating, but I feel like in this particular case, going in the order that I read them kind of like mixes it up between high and low ratings. So hopefully at no point it will feel like the video is too much of a downer where I'm just complaining about books for a long period of time. So it is safe to say that September began on a very high note because the first book that I finished in the month was Memories of Ice by Steven Erikson, which a lot of you probably know is the 3rd book in Malazan Book of the Fallen. And I did not read all of this in September. I think that I was probably about a third of the way through, possibly a little bit more than a third of the way through when the month started, because I started this all the way back on me and Ben's trip to Kelowna, and that was in the final week of August. So I'm gonna guess that I started this probably around August, like 27th, something like that. But I always count books in the month that I finished them. And regardless, most of this book got read in September anyway. And so this was a 5-star. This was an easy 5-star. I haven't given every book in Malazan 5 stars. This has been the first one that's like a full 5 and not just like rounded up, but I have thoroughly enjoyed like every book so far. This one just had like, it had an arc that we were following that I enjoyed the most, and certain characters, like a certain group of characters, I was very interested in this sort of like alliance and coalition that was going on. I really enjoyed a lot of the characters that were like involved in that, not to mention the fact that even though in Dead House Gates we have some characters that we were familiar with, in this book especially, we get back to like a lot of the characters that we were introduced to in Gardens of the Moon. And I loved that, but not because I wasn't on board for Dead House Gates, but just because I do love these characters. And there's one character in particular that I won't name because I got my heart broken a little bit, and Ben knows. I was like, just telling him extensively about how much I love said character, and then this character got killed. So I know that that's not necessarily always final in Malazan because there's a lot of magical things going on. And not that they don't feel earned, but there's a lot of like interesting dealings with death in this series. However, that still did, it hurt me. It hurt me. So yeah, this book hurt me a lot, but it was also great. And Steven Erikson has a way of writing the like war campaigns where I'm never bored with them, where there are some other times where I'll be a little bit like, okay, let's like get on with it. Like, if there are solid character dynamics and interactions and character developments going on during the more like quote unquote boring parts of a war campaign, then I'm pretty much always invested, and that's what this had. It's a kind of hard balance to strike, because you have to have still interesting things going on for the reader while you're having maybe not like objectively plot-wise interesting things going on. But Malazan is just so like rich in storylines that you can easily have less plot happening in one plot line while you still have things happening in another plot line. And there's just so many characters to care about in here. Obviously, if you don't find yourself caring about the characters, it's going to be a lot harder to get through like a book that's this much of a brick. But since I loved them, I loved the book. Okay, so next up, a very different read from Memories of Ice. We have Daisy Darker by Alice Feeney, and this was one that I was very excited to get to because it's kind of a retelling of And Then There Were None by Agatha Christie. Like, it doesn't follow the same exact concept, because in this book, it's Daisy Darker's family and all of these people know each other and they're coming together to celebrate their grandmother's 80th birthday. Whereas, of course, in And Then There Were None, it is people who appear to be unconnected, and while some of them may know each other, all of them definitely don't, and they're not sure why they've been called to the island, or like they've been called together under false pretenses. So there is a false pretense in here, because it turns out that it's Grandma's 80th birthday, but in reality, the family members start dying one by one, and you slowly start to feel the tension rise and everything. So I ended up giving this 2.5 stars. I ended up being quite disappointed by it, because I felt that, for one, the family drama sometimes was interesting, but it sometimes dragged on for a very long time without kind of increasing the stakes or increasing the tension. Like, I remember saying at one point during this that, like, it's been far too long since we had a murder for a book that is supposed to feel like that. And the other thing that I had a major complaint about was the fact that I really felt like our main character had zero agency throughout the book. And so, without going into spoilers, that was a major problem that I had, and it all kind of tied in to the like culmination of the plot and like what the reveal was at the end. But the reveal, even though it explained some things to me, it didn't save the book for me, because I still had that like experience up to that point of being very frustrated with the way that characters were interacting and the way they were being like developed or not developed. So I did kind of respect, like, I thought it was interesting. I was like, oh, okay, I understand now what we've been dealing with. But it didn't help me, unfortunately, enjoy it more, which was sad, because I've had this on my shelf for quite a while, and for some reason it was just one that I thought I was really gonna enjoy, and it just didn't really turn out that way. Like, I didn't hate it, but it was just completely fine and not anything special. Next up, we have, unfortunately, my least favorite book of the month, and that is God in Pink by Hassan Namir. And this is, I don't even really know what to say. I'm gonna tell you the synopsis and then kind of tell you where the disconnect was for me. So the back of this book says, a revelatory novel about being queer and Muslim set in war-torn Iraq in 2003. Rami is a closeted university student whose parents have died and who lives under the close scrutiny of his strict brother and sister-in-law. They exert pressure on him to find a wife, leaving him anguished and struggling to find a balance between his sexuality, religion, and culture. Desperate for counsel, he seeks the advice of Ammar, a sheikh at a local mosque whose tolerance is challenged by the contradictions between Rami's dilemma and the teachings of the Quran, leading him to question his own belief system. And so I thought that this was going to be like an introspective, raw, emotional experience where we get to follow these characters and really dive into their psyches, and that it would be really fascinating. But unfortunately, I did not like the writing at all, and I hesitate to ever say that writing is like objectively bad, but I feel like for what is supposed to be promised in this book, the writing is not delivering at all, and that's why I didn't like it. Like, I felt like I could not have possibly felt more disconnected from what was going on in here. It's a very one scene to the next, cut and dried, just like no emotion, no indulgence. Like, I don't know, I really thought that this was going to be different from what it was. And so the result was that I would rather just read the synopsis and imagine my own story of what came from this versus what the book actually was. It also had some really awful, gruesome, horrifying scenes that were not like, they were almost even more horrifying because of this like simplistic writing style, because they're just presented for you so matter-of-factly. But we did not reflect on them. We moved on to other things so quickly. Like, the main character, he doesn't feel like he could possibly be a real human being the way that he reacts to things emotionally. So I don't know. I don't want to just keep criticizing it. So I will just have to say that, like, I can't in good conscience recommend this, because I feel like if you are looking for a story that's written with any emotional care, this does not seem to be it. And I sincerely apologize if this is something that the author has themselves experienced, because it's not coming through. Like, I just don't understand. So yeah, unfortunately, this was 2 stars. I almost feel like I'm talking myself down to like a 1.75, but it's hard for me to feel like I should rate something in the 1-star range, but this was just not it for me. Now, to put us on a bit of a more upward trajectory again, we have the one book this month where I can say that it was a little bit more middle of the road, and don't get me wrong, I still enjoyed it, but it's just not reaching those like levels of the higher rated books of the month, and that is Edge Dancer by Brandon Sanderson. And so I think the first time I read this, I gave it a 4, and this time I'm giving it a 3.5 because it's still very solid and enjoyable to me, and I kind of appreciate this growth that we get with Lift in this book. And I'm not even sure, like, Lift herself is growing, but I feel like most of what this novella accomplishes is for Lift to grow on me, because she's still not my favorite character, and I don't have like a problem with her as a character. It's reading from her perspective that I don't love. I still kind of find it harder to get into it, and like a little bit cringy sometimes, like when she uses the word awesome and everything like that. But I still enjoy it, and I really enjoy like the culmination of her story that she ends up, like what she ends up achieving in this novella, and the insight that we get into Nail as a herald, and it's very solid. I do think that now that I've read Dawn Shard as well, I do think that Edge Dancer struggles to justify itself a little bit more than Dawn Shard does. I feel like this is less essential to our understanding of the Stormlight Archive, whereas Dawn Shard feels very essential to our understanding of the Cosmere as a whole. Maybe that's just me, and that's not to say that this shouldn't exist, but it's more of a just like middle of the road casual enjoyment for me, and not on the level of the main novels for me. Next up, we have the one romance novel that I read this month, and that is The 7-Year Slip by Ashley Poston, and I really enjoyed this. I ended up giving this 4.25 stars. I'm not gonna lie, I was hoping that it was gonna be like a 5, but while I didn't end up with that like favorite book feeling, I still really enjoyed this. It did make me a little bit emotional at points, which is usually my hallmark for when a book has really gotten to me. So basically in The 7-Year Slip, we are dealing with our main characters. Like, I know our female main character is named Clementine, but I honestly don't remember the male character's name And I think it's because he has two names, so maybe that's not so much on me. He has like a name that he went by when he was a younger man, and then a name that he goes by in the present. I think his present day name is James. Apologies. But anyway, we have Clementine, who had a really close relationship with her aunt, and her aunt passes away, and Clementine inherits her apartment. And this apartment is almost normal, but not quite. It does have some magic to it, and the magic is that sometimes when you enter the apartment, you will be sort of like in a wrinkle in time where inside the apartment, your time has become merged with a time 7 years distant from you. And so that time can either be 7 years in the future or 7 years in the past, depending on your perspective. Like if you are the person in your present and you go into the apartment and you realize that the apartment is 7 years in the past, then that's your scenario. But there could also be a scenario, I believe, where someone could enter the apartment and the person could be 7 years in the future, I think. But Clementine is reluctant to start living in her aunt's apartment until she's kind of forced to, because she just associates it so much with her aunt. She's still grieving. She has so many emotional memories tied to that place, and she doesn't really want to like start living there and change all of that. She kind of wants to preserve it. But when she begins to live in this apartment, she ends up experiencing the 7-year slip, and she meets a boy, or a man really, in his mid-20s, and she is, I believe, 29 at this point. And so I think that she's 29 and she meets this man when he is either 25 or 26, and he has just moved to the city. He is staying in the apartment for the summer because Clementine's aunt is actually away for the summer traveling with her. So he is just like subletting for the summer until he can get on his feet in the city. And Clementine obviously never met him in the past because her and her aunt were away. But in the present, when she moves in, she starts to experience this like time warp, and they kind of start to form a relationship. But obviously both of them have things going on in their own present timelines, and Clementine has no idea what he is like 7 years in the future in her own timeline, who he has become, like where he is in life and what he's doing. Like obviously he could have met someone, he could be married, he could not even live there anymore. But as you would expect, the timelines do eventually intersect because this is a romance novel. And I really enjoyed the building of the relationship and kind of how everything ended up coming together in the present. I will say that I was confused by the pacing of this for a period of time. I sincerely felt like we were still in the beginning parts of the book, like the introductory parts, and I was like more than halfway, almost 2/3 of the way through the book, and so I was kind of like, what's gonna happen? Like, how exactly are we resolving this? I did end up being happy with it, but I feel like that kind of contributes to my 4.25 rating, where I was just like, I felt unmoored within time within the book, which is kind of ironic given like what it's about, but it didn't feel like it was pulling me onward. It made me feel kind of confused, but I would still really recommend this. I still really enjoyed it. There are some kind of spicy scenes, but I think on the whole, this is more of a wholesome leaning emotional romance than it is like a spicy romance. So depends on your taste, I guess. But yeah, I would definitely recommend The 7-Year Slip. I'm a little bit afraid to read a novel love story by Ashley Poston because I know people are not liking that as much as they liked this, but you never know. We'll see. Okay, next up we have my final negative review for the month. I promise we ended the month, on a high note. I'm not usually like this. Like, if you've watched my channel for a while, you know that I don't know whether it's just that I'm good at picking books for myself, like good at judging my taste, but I'm a pretty positive reviewer, and I feel like it's very strange for me to have 3 2-star books in 1 month. Like, very strange. I did not like it one bit. So here's hoping that we can start like getting rid of those. I don't know, like maybe it's more in the thriller lit fic category that I'm not always as good at telling, because sometimes it can be harder to tell which tone a book is going to take. But regardless, I don't want the 2 stars. I want it to stop. So after this, fingers crossed. So anyway, we have Something in the Water by Catherine Steadman. And so I do own this physical copy that I got, I think from Value Village. It was secondhand somewhere. And what I actually did was I listened to the audiobook from Libby. I didn't actually read from this physical copy, but obviously I just have it to hold up because it's been on my shelves for quite a while. And the first thing I will say is that the audiobook is narrated by the author, and she does do a really good job. She's a really good narrator. And the book starts on this very intriguing note where the first chapter, it's either chapter 1 or it's the prologue, I don't remember for sure, but we have our main female character digging a grave and being on a timeline where like she needs to hide this body. And so we kind of know the culmination of where the book is going, and the question is what happens and how we got there. And I did enjoy like the audiobook itself. I enjoyed it. I thought that it was well done, and it honestly might even be to the book's detriment that it started on such a high note, because this was just not what I was expecting it to be. Like the cover is very much giving like tropical, and this synopsis about this couple being on their honeymoon to Bora Bora, and they find something in the water and it changes their lives. Like, I wasn't expecting it to be so, what's the word I'm looking for? Like domestic. Like 75% of this book is not them on their honeymoon. It's watching them meet leading up to their wedding, the troubles when her husband loses his job, some like domestic stressors, and after their honeymoon, like the effects. Like, I was hoping for a thriller that like took place in a tropical setting, like with a couple on their honeymoon, and that would like be the bulk of it. And I thought that it was going to be more thrilling. I thought that the nature of what they found in the water was going to be different from what they actually found in the water. And it was just so far, like, I don't know if it's the marketing or if I just haven't heard someone talk about it properly to have decided like that I wasn't actually interested, or to have the proper expectations going in. But it was literally just so far removed from what I hoped that it would be that I was so disappointed. Like, and I actually still liked the female main character, and I feel like the 2 stars that I'm giving this are mostly because I found her intriguing to follow, but like I literally didn't care about most of the other stuff, and it was unfortunate. Like, this was a fairly short audiobook, and so I finished it, but there was a part of it where I was like, I don't know, am I gonna finish this? Because it literally, like, it just comes down to the fact that it wasn't the book that I wanted it to be, and I realized probably like 35% of the way through, when we weren't even on the honeymoon yet, that it wasn't delivering what I hoped it was going to deliver, and it just wasn't the story that I was hoping that it would be. So that's not even really a criticism of the story itself. Like, I fully recognize that there are people who would really enjoy this, but I do think that it's gonna struggle to find the right audience, because like the way that it appears, like the cover having the water on it and the blurb basically just says about their honeymoon. Like, it has a brief description of what they do for work, which ends up being way more important than I thought that it would be, but mostly it just says they're on their honeymoon, they're scuba diving, they find something in the water. Like, I think that the marketing of this is failing it. There needs to be more in this blurb about the fact that this is a domestic thriller. So yeah, like, if you're interested in it, that's honestly great, but just know that because if you don't want that, then you're probably not going to like it, which is what happened to me. But we're ready to move on now. We're ready to move on to the 5-star that I finished the month with. Thank God. Big shocker, a Stormlight book gets 5 stars. Honestly, I was really happy about this. I know that it's not a shock, like I'm not shocked that I loved this, because I vividly remembered how much I loved the ending of Oathbringer, and in my opinion, Oathbringer has the best, like, Sanderlanche ending of any Stormlight book so far. However, I remembered my first time reading this being, like, not bored exactly in the first part of the book, but feeling that it was, like, long and drawn out. And I think that that was probably a product of reading Words of Radiance and then Oathbringer fairly closely back to back, and the fact that Words of Radiance ends on such a high note, and the same thing can be said about Oathbringer into Rhythm of War, is that I wasn't expecting it to, like, slow down so much. I just didn't know where the pacing was going, the story that we were building. And I think that I was honestly able to just sit back and appreciate it so much more on this read through, because I was appreciating the efforts that Dalinar was putting in. I was, like, just appreciating his character and the development that he was going through so much more. I really appreciated the internal turmoil that Kaladin was going through. I will say that this read through, I have not liked Shallan as much. I still like her. I'm not a Shallan hater by any means, but I do think that her arc that she is going through, without saying any spoilers, it feels like it's the same book after book. And, like, I do understand that it's not going to be linear. Like, when you talk about the actual like turmoil and things that she's struggling with as a character, like, her progress is definitely not going to be linear, and I do definitely understand that. But I feel like Sanderson kind of tried to have the same plot line for her twice in Oathbringer and Rhythm of War. So we'll see how I feel when I reread Rhythm of War, but I think that that's where it kind of faltered. And then I think that there are some, like, in-world character flaws of her perspective that I didn't really notice the first time, whereas I feel like a lot of the characters that surround her, like Kaladin and Adolin and Dalinar, they challenge their biases more often, and they are shown to be, like, giving more consideration to the changes that are happening in the world and what they mean and how the world and humanity might move forward. And to be fair, like, Yasna and Navani, so far we haven't really seen their perspectives on some of these things, but Shallan, I just found, like, it seems to me that in a lot of her perspectives, like, she doesn't really mind some of the prejudices or some of the, like, well-entrenched power structures, as long as they're not affecting her personally. So I hope to see more development from her on that front in later books, and maybe she has some of it in Rhythm of War and I'm just not remembering. But I think that Shallan is so wrapped up in herself as a character because of the way that her development goes, that she's not given the chance to reflect on some of these things as much. That being said, I do like her and Adolin. I loved Adolin and Renarin in this book. We didn't get a ton of Yasna, but I've really enjoyed Navani so far. And, of course, like, Kaladin and Dalinar. And there are lots of characters to enjoy. I definitely was able to pick up on more on this read. Like, a lot more things make more sense that have to do with the Cosmere as a whole. Because I read the Stormlight Archive first, Back when I read it the first time, I had not read anything else from the Cosmere, so things definitely make a little bit more sense. And it's still a 5-star book for me. I greatly enjoy like just sinking in to this. And for long books, I've always said I can read these really fast. Like they are super easy to get through, probably just because I'm having such a good time also. But yeah, I'm really excited to read Rhythm of War. I believe that's going to be in November in preparation for the big release, and I'm really excited about it. So yes, happy to say that Oathbringer was once again a 5-star on my reread. Okay, so those are the 7 books that I read in the month of September. As we discussed, and as you can see, it was a little bit of an up and down reading month. Hopefully October is a little bit better. It is already off to a better start. And I just want to keep that energy going because obviously I don't like not enjoying the books that I'm reading, and I don't like having to come give them a negative review later, but I'm always going to be honest about what I thought. So I really hope that you enjoyed this video. Please like if you liked it. Let me know down in the comments what you think if you've read any of these. And as always, I'll have my socials and Discord with Ben linked in the description. And if you're interested in any of that stuff, that is where you will find it. And I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Bye!